Works for me. Thank you. My name is Evie Stewart, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm the director of the Masur Museum of Art. And this talk tonight that Rabbi Judy Ginsburgh is giving for us is in conjunction with an exhibition we have that is up through February 5th. It's called Theo Tobiasse Textural Emergence. And it is borrowed from the Alexandria Museum of Art in Alexandria, Louisiana. And it's a beautiful exhibition. If you are in town and you have the chance to come see it, please come see us for any time now until the 5th. I'll tell you a little bit about our guest speaker tonight. Judy Ginsburgh grew up in a family with a great appreciation for the arts. She received her Bachelor of Music degree in vocal performance from the prestigious Indiana University Jacobs School of Music, and made her living as a touring musician and recording artist for almost 35 years. After many years of study, she received her rabbinic ordination, in 2014, and has been the part-time rabbi at Temple B'nai Israel in Monroe since 2016. Judy and her husband, Bob, live in Alexandria. They have 3 children, 6 grandchildren, and 3 grand dogs. I will now turn it over to Rabbi Judy.
Thank you, Evie, and thank you, Alyssa. I want to thank both of you and thank the Masur Museum. This is a gem in Monroe. If you don't know about it, you really need to know about the Masur Museum of Art. I've gone to several different exhibits there, and they've all been outstanding. It's a beautiful place, and the exhibits are wonderful, and it's free. So I just encourage anyone who can get to Monroe to please check it out often. I told Evie I was really glad I was able to see this exhibit the way they have it in person. I was able to go there in December, and it is too bad that you can't see it in person. I would encourage you to go and see it in person before it leaves, because the slides that I have really don't do it justice. It's really beautiful art. I have I can't believe people are doing fireworks outside of my window right now. It's like it's not January 1st anymore. So if you hear noises, there are fireworks going off in my neighborhood. Anyway, I have a real personal connection to this exhibit. Number one, it is part of the permanent collection of the Alexandria Museum of Art, but I was the person that got it for them. I made friends with a very wealthy art collector whose name is Stephen Markoff, who had a bunch of arts. He lives in California. He had a bunch of art sitting in a warehouse in New Jersey, and he was looking for a tax deduction. So he found me and the nonprofit that I run online. The nonprofit that I run is called Arts and Healthcare, and we bring art and all of the arts into healthcare facilities. And so his secretary contacted me and wanted to know if they could donate some art to us. Well, we are a very small nonprofit that works on less than a $50,000 budget a year, and I just didn't know what we were going to do with this kind of art. Now I wish I had said yes, because maybe it would be hanging in my house. But being the type of person that I am, I called the Alexandria Museum and asked if they would be interested in some of his art. And they said yes. And so they not only got this collection of Theo Tobiasse's, but they also got a collection of Roland Golden's art, who passed away recently, and he's a Louisiana artist from South Louisiana. I met Roland once and spent some time at his house, and my parents knew him very well. So they have a wonderful collection of his, and they have one other collection that's a mixed collection. So I feel like this collection is kind of part of my family. It wouldn't be in Alexandria if it weren't for me, and it's just an incredible collection of art. So we'll start out with me telling you a little bit about Theo Tobiasse, who lived a very long life. He was born in 1927 in Yaffo, which is now part of Tel Aviv in Israel. His parents were both Jewish, and they were from Lithuania, from a village called Kaunos or Kovno. And actually, my mother's side of the family is from Kovno, Lithuania. So I have another connection to this exhibit. So he was born in Israel, but when he was 3 years old, his father moved the family to Paris because he needed work and he couldn't find work that he could do in Israel. So he actually moved to Lithuania for a little while and then 2 years later moved to Paris. His father was in the printmaking business. So Theo grew up watching his father do some sort of art form, more of a graphic art form, because that's what his father did. He was a printer. He definitely had a talent for art. His father noticed this at an early age, and he would often sketch, and he even studied art privately at some of the art schools in Paris. So he was lucky enough to have that opportunity. One major world event changed his life forever, and that was in November of 1938. There was an event called Kristallnacht, or the Night of Broken Glass, and it was when violence broke out toward the Jews throughout Germany. In 2 days, 250 synagogues and 7,000 Jewish businesses were looted and destroyed. The day after Kristallnacht, 30,000 German Jewish men were arrested solely for being Jewish, and they were sent to concentration camps, while many of the women were sent to German jails. Because of events like this, Tobias's family moved to Paris, and they were glad they were there. The German forces in 1940, Paris fell to the German forces. And in 1942, the Germans began rounding up Jews and sending all of them to concentration camps. With the help of a Christian concierge in the building where the Tobias family lived, they were hidden away in an unoccupied apartment, similar to the story of Anne Frank. So when the Nazis came searching for them, the soldiers assumed they had fled the area. The concierge allowed them to stay in the apartment hidden for the next 2 years. So he spent the next 2 years of his teenage life in this apartment that had no windows. It was dark, and even if they had had a window, they couldn't have opened it because they needed to be in hiding. They were able to survive with the help of these Christian neighbors and Jewish members of the French resistance. During this time in hiding, they couldn't go outside. No light came into the apartment, and Tobias spent most of his time sketching, reading, and playing chess with his father. This is a picture of him when he was a teenager, and this is one of his sketches that he did as a young man. In August of 1944, Paris was liberated, and his family walked out of the apartment. He walked out with a large portfolio of drawings. After the war, he always felt like he needed to have a way to support himself, and so he turned to commercial art and quickly found a job. He practiced commercial art until 1960, when he started painting again. He was now in his 30s. And once one of his paintings won first place at an exhibition for new artists in Nice, he started becoming known and his paintings started to sell. In 1970, he visited Jerusalem for the first time as an adult, and this brought him much closer to his Jewish roots. So this just happened to be a graphic poster that I found that he did of New Orleans. I thought that was kind of interesting. I find Tobias's work very similar to the work of Chagall. It's colorful, it contains symbols and references to his past and his Jewish heritage. Like Chagall, Tobias worked in a variety of artistic mediums. He painted, he drew, he did sculptures, he did glasswork, and he did printmaking. He experimented with art and art techniques, And he actually developed a new technique for making lithographs with 18 to 20 colors in them. His work contains symbols that refer to his time in hiding with his family. In these two prints of his, you can see some of the things that you'll see over and over again in his work. In this, can you see where my cursor is here? I hope so. In this one, you'll see a chessboard. You see the checkerboard in a lot of his work. This other one, you see the checkerboard on the leg of this figure. You also see that symbolizes him remembering playing chess with his father when they were in hiding. You also see lots of wagons and modes of transportation in his work. And this symbolizes movement and exile, because he moved many times in his life, and he always kind of felt like he didn't have a home. He was always hiding from something and trying to get somewhere else. So you see the wagon here in this one. You also see what looks like a bus or a car up here, and then another one. You see this over and over again in his work. He felt that art was a way for the artist to overcome the evils he had experienced on his flesh. Though his art seems dreamlike and full of colorful, larger-than-life characters, he was an artist who constantly felt he was in exile. He left Nice for New York in 1984 because he feared the Russians, and he did not believe he would survive another occupation. While in New York, one of his drawings contained the phrase, "My soul is a boat looking for its promised land." Tobiasse saw America as the ultimate expression of freedom. He died in France in 2012 at the age of 85. So now we're going to look at some of the symbols that are in his art. While looking at this particular collection that's at the museum now, see how many chess boards or checkerboards you can find. Notice how many wheels and references to transportation are in his work. You'll also see lots of teapots. These refer to the warmth that home provides and his longing for a home. There are also many, many Jewish symbols in his work. You see the tablets that contain the Ten Commandments, and there are 4 works that are from a suite celebrating the Jewish holiday Shavuot, which celebrates the receiving of the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai. So we'll talk about that a little later. You'll also see the menorah, the 7-branched candelabra that was in the ancient temples in Jerusalem, and almost every temple today has a 7-branched candelabra in it, symbolizing the 7 days of the week. So these were symbols of light, and they're in many, many of his pieces of art. You'll also see glimpses of some of his favorite cities like New York, Jerusalem, Paris, and Venice. You'll see lots of Hebrew words and often things written in French. In this one, we have the word Shavuot written in Hebrew, and we also have someone playing the shofar, the ram's horn, which we hear on the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah. You see lots of fruit in his work as well, like this one up here, and especially apples. He thought that the apple symbolized the trust between a man and a woman and was a sensuous fruit because of what happened in the Garden of Eden. You also see lots of voluptuous female figures in his work. His mother died when he was just 12, and so he missed her a lot, and women were very important to him. He's honoring his mother with all of these females in his work, and the women in his art always depicted strong, larger-than-life women. So this was his way of honoring his mother and all the things that women do. One little known fact about his paintings is that he always wrote a personal message in Yiddish, which is a combination of Hebrew and German. It was a language spoken by Eastern European Jews. He would write this personal message in Yiddish and glue it face down to the canvas before he painted or collaged on it. And so no one will ever know these secret messages without having to destroy the painting itself. Thought that was an interesting fact about him. So now we're going to look at some of his works that are in this collection that's at the Masur Museum right now. When you walk up the staircase, the very first piece that you will see is this piece called America. It's a lithograph on paper, and almost all of the pieces in this collection currently at the Masur were works that he did in the 1980s, from about 1980 to about 1986 or 7. They're all in that area. This America picture, of course, you see the disc that has some semblance of our flag with the stars and the stripes. You see the skyline of Manhattan with the word Manhattan in New York on it. And you see America, which appears to be on a ship that these people are on going to America. So again, there's travel, there's going to some other place. You can also, you're not going to be able to see it here, but I was looking at some of the Hebrew. When you get to see the real piece, there's a lot of Hebrew written in here, and this is a collage. So he has actual pieces from a Hebrew or Yiddish newspaper that he's glued onto this piece of art in various places. And I noticed that in one place there was the Hebrew phrase, the Hebrew word hachnasat. And then it looked like it had the next word, orchim. The phrase hachnasat orchim in Hebrew means welcoming guests. And I'm pretty sure that's what he meant to put there, because he saw America, like I said, as the ultimate place for freedom. He saw America as welcoming everyone. And so he did include that phrase in part of this piece of art. Also, if you look at the top right, and again, you can't really see it here. Actually, it's on the left in this one, right here. It says haaretz, which means the land in Hebrew. So there's lots of symbolism here. America was, like I said, the ultimate freedom and safety for him from exile. He felt like if he was in America, nobody was going to touch him and nobody was going to exile him. He wasn't going to have to hide or run from anybody ever again. And he spent a lot of time in New York in particular. So let's look at one of his other this is a lot of the works that are in this collection are called Carborundums. And this is a process, it's a printing process similar to a lithograph, where an image is created on a plate by painting a gritty surface mixed with an acrylic medium. And then once the mixture dries, the plate is inked, wiped, and printed with a press. So the mixture builds up on the plate and then embosses the paper when it goes through the press. So this is one of those works of art, and many of them in this collection are. This one is from a suite called Let My People Go, and this particular piece is called I Have Found the Old Wall. It's interesting to me that on the little, I'm trying to think of the word, the description of this piece of art at the Masur does not mention this at all. And the first thing I saw when I looked at this piece was, you see the woman, she's holding something white in her hand. It's like a square piece of something. Again, it's very hard to see in this, but when you go see it in real life, you can see it very clearly. She's holding this piece of paper, and embossed on that piece of paper is the wall from Jerusalem, the Western Wall, the only remaining wall from the old ancient temple in Jerusalem. And so that's really why it's called I Have Found the Old Wall, I'm sure. But it doesn't really mention that in the description in the museum. You notice too that the woman has a little hole in her coat. You see the little white hole in her coat? You see this a lot in his paintings too, with people with tears in their clothing. And this Jewish people used to tear their clothing when they were grieving for someone in their family. So because he was grieving for his mother, and he grieved for so many, the many times he had to leave people, you see this symbolically in a lot of his work. So that symbolic tearing of the clothes symbolizes grieving for someone who is gone. It also symbolized for him leaving people behind. And of course you see the ship and the wheels symbolizing exile. These people are going somewhere else. Here's another piece from this same Let My People Go suite. And this one is called Let My People Go. You can see people in the wagon. You see the wagon wheel. The name of the piece is written in English, Let My People Go. He loved to write on all of his work. He just liked writing in general. There's a figure floating at the top here. And you see this a lot in Chagall's work as well. Chagall's work has a lot of people that are floating up above. That symbolizes someone who is gone, someone who is remembered. So when you see any figure like that in these Jewish pieces of art floating up above, it means that those are people who we are remembering, or who the artist is remembering, that have gone before us. You can see the hand reaching for the figure who is gone, symbolizing remembrance, that they don't want to forget. And you also see a hand reaching out of the wagon, touching that menorah, the 7-branched candelabra. Again, that's reaching for the light, reaching for something better, for hope that's going to be wherever they're going to. Notice that the hand is kind of halfway in the circle frame and halfway outside. Things are the menorah. So it's kind of like longing and leaving, that there's light and there's hope. So the menorah is kind of leading, it kind of doesn't want to leave, but it has to leave, and it's shining the light of hope to what is going to be in the next place where they go. Again, just very symbolic and things that you see over and over again in his work. Here's another one that talks of exile that I wanted to talk to you about. You'll see a lot of these same symbols. This one is called Portrait of a Family in the Breath of Exile. You see the familiar checkerboard. You see the candelabra. You see an apple in this one being held by a woman. You see the wagon showing you that, yes, they are going somewhere. You notice the woman's hair, again, is flying outside of the frame. This is similar to what we saw in that last piece. It's half in, half out. Perhaps she's staying behind and will hold memories that the family had there, or perhaps she's leaving with reluctance. We don't know. But she's half in, half out. The other thing that I thought was interesting about this one is, and again, this is hard to see, but if you see it in person, and the description doesn't mention this either, this little piece of white that this woman is holding at the very bottom, if you look at it closely, it looks very much like a mezuzah. A mezuzah is a piece of stone or wood or metal that we Jews hang on our doorposts to symbolize that it's a Jewish home and it blesses the home. That case, called the mezuzah, contains a portion from Deuteronomy chapter 6, which is the Shema, the watchword of our faith, telling us that there is only one God. And then it has the phrase that goes on to talk about, you shall love God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your might. That's what's in that mezuzah. And I don't know this, but I'd like to think that that's a mezuzah. I'd like to think that it's something they're taking with them so that when they get to their new home, they will put that mezuzah on their door to proudly show that a Jewish family lives there, and it contains that watchword of our faith that God is always with us and God is one. Let's look at one more exile painting or lithograph. This one is called Will You Tear Us Away from Babylon? We see the teapot, we see the writing, we see the menorah, and we see that they're going somewhere. The Babylonian exile took place in 586 BCE after the destruction of the first temple in Jerusalem. The Jews were exiled to Babylon for many, many years, and it wasn't until 538 that they were allowed back in Israel. When they returned to Israel after many years in exile, they had forgotten many of their Jewish traditions, and they had to relearn them. You see the people carrying that seven-branched menorah. To me, it symbolizes that they are bringing that back to the people. They are going to reestablish their Jewishness now that they can come back to their homeland. They're carrying it in darkness, so it may indicate that they are lost, or they are lost in a strange land. They need to relearn how to be in Israel again. At the bottom, you do see the teapot, which represents the warmth of home. And he wrote the name of the piece in French this time. I don't read a lot of French, but I can tell that the last word is Babylon, with the question mark. He often used phrases in his artwork. He loved the sound of words, and he felt that without words, his work was incomplete. He said, "Words are very important to me. You can, with them, say such marvelous and fabulous things. For me, painting is not enough." So you do see words in almost everything that he did. Now we're going to talk about a suite of 4 pieces of art. All 4 of them are in this exhibit, and they're from a series called Shavuot. As I mentioned earlier, the word Shavuot means weeks, and it celebrates the giving of the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai. Shavuot happens 7 weeks after our holiday of Passover. So that's where the word comes from. We count 7 weeks from the Seder that we have at Passover, and then it is Shavuot. Now, if you know anything about Jewish history, you know that Passover commemorates the exile of the Jews from Egypt. They had been slaves in Egypt, and Pharaoh finally let the people go. Moses leads them across the Reed or Red Sea to their freedom, and they wander in the desert forever until they get to the Promised Land. So during part of this, from the time they left Israel, 7 weeks later, is when they really become a Jewish community and they receive God's laws. Moses receives the laws from God and transfers them or tells them to the people who are gathered below. So one of the things that they would do a lot to celebrate Shavuot is one of 3 pilgrimage or festival holidays that we celebrate. And during these pilgrimage festivals, the people would bring offerings to the temple in Jerusalem, especially the first fruits from the harvest. So during this holiday, they would bring their first fruits to the temple and celebrate the giving of these first fruits. So let's look at the first piece in this Shavuot series. There's so much Jewish symbolism here. You see someone blowing the shofar. which was what we would use to call people together or to let people know that a holiday was starting. The person who's blowing the shofar has a prayer shawl on. You can clearly see the stripes of a Jewish talit or prayer shawl, and it's extended even down here. When I look at this part of the prayer shawl, it looks like matzah. Matzah is the unleavened bread that we eat on Passover. And so, someone who's not Jewish may not see all of these things. It doesn't mention that in the description. But I can't help but think that he did this on purpose, that this is matzah. It looks just like it. You see the figure floating up ahead, overhead, and that would symbolize people who are no longer here. But that person is holding on to the Ten Commandments, and another person who is very much there now is also holding on to the Ten Commandments. So to me, this symbolizes that all of our teachings go from generation to generation. That's something that's very important in Judaism, is that our laws and our customs and our traditions are passed down from one generation to the next. So again, I'm not in his head. I just, I'm looking at this as a rabbi, and I see so much symbolism in this one in particular. You have the person who is no longer with us passing those laws and customs down to the person who is very much there in the piece of art. There's you see several people down there. Again, they kind of look like they might be going somewhere. And then you have this oxen that's carrying fruit, bringing the first fruits to Jerusalem for this pilgrimage festival. On the blanket that's on the oxen is the Hebrew word Shavuot, which is the name of the holiday that this suite is about. We're going to look at all four pieces in this Shavuot suite, and you'll recognize a lot of similarities. Here's the second piece. Again, we see here a woman, clearly a woman, blowing the shofar. She's holding the tablets of the Ten Commandments, and below her are people who look to be journeying, going somewhere, with the oxen leading them, with the apple on its head, possibly going to Jerusalem on their pilgrimage that they would have done in ancient times. At the top of the work is a crown, and that would symbolize the crown that's on our Torah. The Torah contains the first 5 books of the Bible. It's a sacred book that we have in our ark in every synagogue. And then to the left of the crown, you see the word again in Hebrew, Shavuot. But the focal point of this work is the large bowl of fruit. And this would symbolize the abundance that they would have at the end of the journey, and also the giving of this sacrifice or offering that they would have brought to the temple during one of the ancient pilgrimages. Let's look at our third piece in this suite. Again, here we are, the third one. We see the shofar, probably a man this time. He looks like he's a little scruffy here. He has the prayer shawl on. We see a woman holding the tablets again. And underneath her, if you count, there are 12 people there. And I think 12, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I think they stand for the 12 tribes of Israel. That after they got to Israel, the kingdom was split and there were 12 tribes. So these could possibly stand for the 12 tribes of Israel. Again, we see the word Shavuot over here. We see the huge, really oversized container containing the fruit, again symbolizing abundance and the offering that they would have brought. You also can see, not really seeing that, let's see here. Okay, this is, yeah, I'm getting lost of where I am. So that would have, yeah, the oversized container. again, a lot of his stuff is really not to scale. And again, you see that in Chagall's work as well. So I find this one very interesting, especially with the symbolism of the 12 people here, possibly being the 12 tribes. And our last piece of art in this Shavuot suite. We don't have anyone blowing the shofar this time. I guess they figure we already know it's Shavuot. They would usually blow the shofar to let us know the holiday was coming. But there's lots of other symbolism here. You see the menorah here on the left. In the center is a huge tree of life, and it's actually touching the Ten Commandments, and so is the female figure here. Again, symbolizing that Torah is everything. Torah is life, and the Torah is given to us to know how to live. The Hebrew word Shavuot this time is at the bottom, and you also see he wrote his name on this one. It says Theo right there. We have another menorah here hanging from the tree of life. We have the oxen with the fruit. And over here on the right, we have a village with even a little flower. So this one is the first one where we actually see some semblance of a place that people may be going to. This would be a home where he found security. These columns represent the columns of Venice. I remember I told you he would often include symbolism from his favorite cities, Venice and Paris and New York and Jerusalem. So these columns are symbolic of what he saw when he went to Venice. I love this Shavuot series. I just find that there's so much Jewish symbolism in them. And before we end, I picked one other piece that I wanted to share with you, because this one, again, the description didn't say everything that I thought it needed to say, but it said everything for someone who's not Jewish. So I'm going to show this one to you with more Jewish eyes and tell you what I think about it. This last piece is called Nesting Doll. You see a woman with her hands raised in praise to God. There appears to be a baby inside of her or on her, and it also has its hands raised. To me, this symbolizes again the passing of heritage to another generation. It used to be that the generational line in Judaism was passed through the mother. Now it's acceptable, especially in more liberal Judaism, for the generational line to be passed through the father or mother. But it used to be a matrilineal line, that if your mother was Jewish, you were Jewish. Now it can be either one. Tobias thought of women as the source of life. And I'd like to think that the little red X's and O's that are there represent love. The love he had for his mother, the love that a parent has for their child, and vice versa. He also wrote the word shalom, which means peace or hello or goodbye, in Hebrew as a necklace. The interesting thing about it is it's written backwards. It clearly, if you know Hebrew script, looks like the word shalom, but Hebrew is read from right to left, not like English. So in order to read this as shalom, you're reading it as you would in English, shalom. But it should have been written the other way if it's Hebrew. I find that very interesting. And notice how the women's feet are turned. They almost look like they're turned backwards. This indicates to me that she's possibly reluctant to leave somewhere or anxious to go somewhere where she is not. So we see a lot of symbolism. Her hair also blowing where part of it isn't in the frame symbolizes that kind of, I'm here now, but I may be somewhere else, or I'm reluctant to go there. So I'll end the presentation by just showing you this last slide. Again, Theo Tobiasse lived from 1927 to 2012. He was a multidisciplined artist. He worked in many, many different mediums. His art is described as a blend of surrealism, expressionism, and modern primitivism. And I was able to find this self-portrait that he did of himself. At the top it says auto-portrait, and I don't know enough French. I think it says auto-portrait. I can't really make out the last two words, but then it says in blue, and then his name is coming off of his ear, Tobiasse, with the paintbrush dripping. So I hope you have learned a lot about this artist. I encourage you to go see the exhibit. Definitely familiarize yourself more with his art. I see there's some things in the chat. I'm going to see what's there. If there are any questions or if I can answer anything, I'm just opening up the chat. Alice had said, yes, there's all kinds of fruit, definitely pomegranates. Apples were the big thing, though. Those apples symbolized the sexuality of women and the trust between a man and a woman from the Garden of Eden. But you also see pears and pomegranates and other fruit. Yeah. Alice is my sister-in-law. She's catching a lot of things here. All right, so I think I've answered most of the questions in the chat. And if anyone else has a question, please feel free. I can probably be pretty good about answering questions about the Jewish stuff. We may have to defer to Alyssa if it's more artistic in nature. But I thank all of you for being here. Again, I thank the Masur Museum for hosting this. I hope you can go see it in person. It's just such vibrant art, and like Evie said, the pieces are much bigger than you think they are. They're just breathtaking, really.
Does anyone have any questions for Rabbi Judy?
No, but I'd like to say how much I
teach,
very
I always say,
knowledgeable.
Rabbi, I
want to thank you
Really,
so much.
really brought this to
Thank you
life.
very much.
Thank you, Judy.
Thank you for coming. I appreciate everyone who took the time to come. I really do.
Very well done. I appreciated it too.